Over the course of my life, I have read many creepypastas. While they tend to vary in quality, I feel that too much emphasis is often placed on that detail. At the end of the day, creepypasta is another way through which people can creatively express themselves. And that tends to leak into my appreciation for the stories I read. I won't act like it isn't fun to pick stories apart bit by bit, pointing out even the smallest of inconsistencies and making a big deal out of them. But sometimes I feel like perhaps this practice is taken too far. While people on the outside may point at creepypasta and talk it down for whatever reason they feel they must, people on the inside can often be no better. Take, for example, the fact that there are a lot of stories which are now ostensibly lost media, simply due to the Creepypasta wiki purging itself of so-called low-quality stories. With that wiki being the only place that they can be found, a lot of these stories are just gone. Hell, sometimes the stories that do survive end up getting modified for the sake of upholding some relatively superficial quality standard. I've even seen people just straight up change the details of stories by adding or removing parts, and seemingly nobody has attempted to stop them. That of course isn't to say that correcting grammar is some inherent act of evil, but instead to point out that the way authors write their stories has equal value to what the writing itself is about. It's like a signature. You can have the exact same name as someone else, but that doesn't mean the two of you will write it the exact same way. Having your story's grammar changed is someone saying that there is an objectively correct way to express yourself, and that you have failed to do it correctly the first time. So now, someone has to do it for you. To make a long story short, the devaluing of creepypasta as stupid stories because Jeff the Killer, in hindsight, wasn't actually well written or scary isn't just an outside practice. Yeah, it's obnoxious, reductive, and fairly reckless to engage with any media like this, but what is there to do about it when even the people who like the media start causing the same problems? Well, the best I can think to do is raise awareness, so here's a video about creepypastas that I can't find anymore. Even if this video can't help find them, at least I won't be taking their existences to the grave with me one day. First, I'll start off by talking about a story that I've already covered before on this channel. This one was about an alleged cheat code in the 5th generation Pokemon games that would result in the player being trapped behind the console screen. I recall it being especially linked to Pokemon White, or its sequel, White 2. The cheat code in question wasn't that of Action Replay or any similar cheating device, but instead a manual button combination that you'd enter, presumably on the game's title screen. I recall it involving the L button somehow. This story always stood out to me due to the image associated with it. It was of the female protagonist character from Pokemon Black and White, Hilda. She was sitting down in some form of fetal position, presumably because the space behind the screen was very small. She didn't look happy, and it's not hard to imagine why. I may recall tears running down her face, or at least welling up under her eyes. There is a very, very strong chance that the story was once on the Creepypasta wiki, as I don't recall myself ever reading stories off-site like that. I know that the story was read on my Nintendo 3DS, as that was my main form of viewing these stories late at night, when I would find myself reading them. I'm sure a lot of the Pokemon players in the audience know of the button combination you use to erase your save data, right? You enter it on the title screen, and it sends you to a completely new screen asking if you really want to delete your save data, warning you of the irreversible nature of this process. This story always reminded me of that. The nature of that screen. It always used to unnerve me. It's likely what a lot of people felt seeing an anti-piracy screen in the wild. That sense of authority the text has. The feeling of having done something wrong. It always felt like the game didn't want you to know about this screen. It sure wasn't inviting in its presentation, yet here it was. Despite how it may feel, you're here. You're on that screen. It has shown itself to you. What did you do? I get the impression that, much like a lot of creepypastas, the lack of knowing is the true reason for fear here. If I ever find the story, it may just leave me more tickled than anything else. The wording will be awkward or poor, and the overall point of the tale will fall flat. It's not unlikely. Yet perhaps that's okay. It's not about finding the story because it's scary. It's about closure. Finding this story because I know it exists. Somewhere out there, a person's voice was projected onto a webpage. Someone's vision. It's only right that it be heard, even if what they had to say may only result in a light chuckle. This next creepypasta is, putting it lightly, the most fitting thing I could include. The existence of this one was brought to my attention one night a few months ago by a close friend as we discussed and read creepypastas. He brought up the existence of a story, yet, try as we may, we couldn't seem to find it. I tried to ask around in my own Discord server, yet nothing ever came of that. So here goes nothing. This is the tale I was told. Do you remember it? The story leading up to its finale isn't something easily recalled. The main idea behind the story is what truly sticks out, and was the way it was introduced. The protagonist of the story is playing some copy of Pokémon, but as the game progresses, the designs of the Pokémon begin to regress in detail, slowly going from recognizable to unknown to abstract, before finally the game ceases to function at all. The point is that each of these designs were from early builds of the original Pokémon games. Beta designs, yes, but also dev art and abstract concepts of what would later become Pokémon, even down to just simple shapes. Before the game stops working, the author is inundated with the same request. Remember them. All of them. Don't let them be forgotten. The story would allegedly then end with the author doing just that, and describing each of them, no matter how simple or mundane the Pokémon was. Actually tracking this creepypasta down was really difficult, and even with the efforts made, nothing ever came of it. It led to reading a ton of stories with apt-sounding titles, a lot of which followed a similar formula to each other. One that, as my friend and I have noted, seems to say a lot about how players, especially children, tend to view their Pokémon. I know for a fact that I was in that boat at one point too. They tend to emphasize the guilt of abandoning games, the feeling of leaving your Pokémon behind. This always leads to the same conclusion. The Pokémon sees the player's actions as malicious or neglectful, seeing to it that they're punished for their actions. It's not uncommon for that punishment to include death, and it's not like the franchise hasn't covered this topic, just look at Baynet, a Pokémon born of a discarded doll's resentment towards its former owner. It's easy to say that these feelings come from nothing, or that the notions they present are stupid, but I see it another way. It's actually a good thing. If children, anyone at all, can have enough empathy in them to worry about pixels on a screen, that brings me hope for the future. The prevalence of this subject matter in stories can be seen as merely a sign of disturbed individuals who care too much about the trivial. That is, of course, if you really want to see it that way. Anything can be doom and gloom if you want it to be that. Returning to the original subject of the entry, this story, even though I've never been allowed to read it, hits me with a myriad of emotions I am all too familiar with. It strikes me directly in my core, and resonates with the point I've been reiterating throughout this video. Every story, no matter how stupid, is worth being read. A sincere attempt to express oneself is never low quality in my eyes. I may not have the time, energy, or patience to read every piece of literature ever written, but if the author found the time to list every single design that was lost to time, I think I can try at least a little harder myself. Viewing things clearly not meant to be viewed at the age you were. It's a time-honored tradition. Part of growing up is learning to defy the authority that tells you what you can and cannot do. It's also just generally how the human brain tends to work. If you're earnestly told not to do something, doing it suddenly seems more appealing. I was never quite as restricted as others likely were. I was the kid that got to play GTA. Obviously, this morphed me into a violent serial killer who lashes out with complex bullet patterns whenever I am approached. But on occasion, the effects of this freedom were more immediately negative. Seeing or reading things my mind would struggle to fully grasp. I was never shown direct gore, but descriptions of gore weren't hard to find. To call what I encountered a creepypasta might be a bit of a stretch, but keeping it out of this video for mere semantics seems a little silly to me. I recall finding it via my Nintendo DSi. With the DSi very likely standing for Deadly Stinger Information, it was only natural that I'd inevitably stumble across something like this. I recall it being on a website named after the Pokemon anime episode Tower of Terror, or perhaps the story itself was part of an ongoing series by such a name. I consider it possible that I found it on the website Pokemon Tower, due to that being a place for fanfiction, but searching for it there didn't seem to yield any results. Mentions of Missing No's Deadly Stinger were definitely hard to miss, so I can only assume the title of the story held that information. The story itself is fuzzy in my mind, save for the part that actually scared me so much. Ash and Misty, alongside Jesse and James, finding out exactly how deadly this stinger was. I remember that at the time I couldn't quite figure out exactly what the story meant by Deadly Stinger, as Missing No isn't exactly known for any stingers. I can only assume it was based off of some form of fan design, much like the famous bird form. Regardless of what made sense, James was the one to receive the stinger's payload. It was a delayed reaction, but with due time, James experienced what I can only describe as a fate so detailed and excruciatingly over the top, that the Russian sleep experiment would have no choice but to shed a single tear. I recall most vividly the line about either his brain or liver exploding, though I'm fairly certain at least one organ was liquefied. It felt like the description of his death went on for at least a paragraph, though my memory is almost definitely failing me in some places. The concepts presented here were as embedded in my mind as the compulsion to breathe. For years following this, I would remember the story, and around the time I started getting into creepypasta, I checked back and found that the story was still there. Just the other night, I found myself unable to sleep as the memories began to flood back in unexpectedly. I was shocked that this story had managed to escape me for this long, and so naturally I went to go look for it again. Nothing. Not a single mention of the story could be found. Trying to find anything in 2025 feels like a pointless endeavor. Google functions about as well as James's organs likely did after the Stinger incident, and it only seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes on. If anyone recalls this one, do tell. I doubt the story itself will ever be found, but at least knowing I'm not alone sounds like a decent form of closure. It was likely around 2010 or 2011 when I first found the story. The last time I saw it must have been 2013. That's all I can really recall. Here's to hoping anything will come of this. This next entry in the video is a bit difficult to talk about. The circumstances surrounding it have made me more than hesitant to bring it up, especially on this channel. I feel like what I'm about to describe will seem like some form of bit, like I'm trying to start an ARG or unfiction project. That's why I've struggled with this topic so much. No matter how I try to phrase it, it always reads as a rambling mess with no cohesion. I always trip over my words, fervently trying to explain myself and feeling like I'm only digging myself a deeper grave. I decided that this video was the best place to talk. The whole thing would be more digestible if I treated it as a mere creepypasta. In a lot of ways, I'm convinced it is one. There are elements of it that leave my stomach in knots, though. To me, it feels viscerally wrong, like my view of the world is being violated every time I have to remember it. I want to know more, and making this known is probably the only way to do so at this point, so here we go. The Green City Light Eyes. A very close friend brought this up to me one night. Several unrelated people he knew had told him of this. It was a story that made him so uncomfortable that he initially didn't tell me it. It wasn't until he stopped talking and started messaging that he was actually able to explain. I definitely can't blame him. The topic of the conversation had turned to strange happenings on the multiplayer hangout map for Sonic Roboblast 2, known as SF94. He had collected these tales over the years and knew they were worth telling while showing me the map. While what was discussed was interesting, this was just plain uncomfortable. While trying to figure out how exactly I should go about telling this story, I realized pretty quickly how easy it would be for people to hijack a genuine search effort by simply saying that they knew what I was talking about and then making stuff up. People could start recreating the phenomenon in-game to trick others. I settled on a simple solution. I'll tell you the tale, but with minimal visual descriptions, That way, you'll get the info you need without leaving room for easy fakes. Anyone trying will stumble because I know when they'll get details wrong. Anyways, the details. Several people brought up the existence of the Green City Light Eyes. As the name implies, they reside in an area known as Green City, which as stated prior is part of the map SF94 for Sonic Roboblast 2. They only appear to those who know that they exist, so sorry to my entire audience. They attempt to stalk players but will only proceed with communication when victims are truly isolated. That is, being home alone and not using the in-game chat. The exact quote provided for what they say to you is as follows. Would you want to give up on those you know just to have something better in life? While it can be assumed that responding with yes would lead to something bad happening, we only know what happens when someone says no. That is, Light Eyes returns to the stalking behavior after telling players that they're still lying to themselves. How exactly one learns of the Light Eyes and thus is able to encounter them is allegedly via recommendations after confiding something personal or dark. They'd be told to seek out the Green City Light Eyes. Okay, off script here. During recording, apparently at this point in the recording, my audio did something normal and cool where everything that you've heard up until this point had to be re-recorded because it simply didn't exist. I don't know how that happens, I don't know how that works, but I had to redo everything that you just heard in order to actually begin, like, the editing process. I don't know what happened. I thought that was interesting. Okay, here's Crick from the past now. It is noted that the Light Eyes allegedly appear more often in the beach area of Green City. Now, is any of this real? I personally want to say no. Obviously it'd be for the best if it wasn't, but I'd feel a bit weird about telling you all this, without raising the point that nothing here has to be supernatural. What we have here could easily be a shared experience from a group of people who all encountered the same weird player or players. The more eccentric details could easily be the ways that their minds decided to parse the encounter, especially given that it was likely an experience had while younger. I feel that to fully articulate my feelings here, I need to bring up something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Something that I feel is sorely missing when discussing topics like these. That being the question of what actual harm exists in believing. If someone comes to you with a story like this, and you reject them, telling them that they're either lying or stupid, what does that serve to do? The reason you shouldn't believe when most people tell you that they just saw Bigfoot isn't because believing in them causes your possessions to disappear off of your person, your hair to fall out. It's because there's a non-zero chance that the person telling you this has a book they're trying to sell. They're trying to exploit you for a resource that they do not deserve. When a person tells you that they saw a ghost, a person who seems visibly scared, a person who couldn't possibly gain anything from saying that except for the relief of seeing someone who can help them, what do you, the person they've decided to confide in, have to lose from allowing them to feel heard? Telling them that they didn't see a ghost won't make them calm down. Telling them that believing in ghosts is stupid does not make their experience suddenly sunshine, rainbows, and beautiful flowers. All you truly do is make them feel more isolated. If you truly believe that there is no ghost to believe in, and you feel it imperative to disprove the ghost, there are more constructive and helpful solutions to such a situation. Why not help show them that there is no ghost? Or even just wait until they're in a better position to take that information, rather than just pushing them further into a corner. From my perspective, it's all about vanity. A person thinking they're too smart or superior to allow another person to be heard, or to have their experiences feel valid if it means having even a 1% chance of looking silly in the end. That gut reaction to avoid looking silly just in case the person isn't right. But let me ask you, any of you who feel this preservation instinct, what's worse, looking silly for 5 seconds? Or feeling like you can never, ever tell anyone about something that happened to you because you're afraid of being treated like shit? I've gone my entire life feeling as though what I've been through isn't valid. All of the weird, hard-to-explain stuff I've faced having to be locked away in my mind by force because nobody wants to be decent enough about it to let me be open. I know what that pain is like. And I'm grateful for those of you who are willing to listen to the 2023 Halloween special with open minds. I choose to believe the Light Eye's tale has more to it. Not because there's evidence that exists, but because I lose nothing by doing so. And those who went through it gain so much from being heard. I want to find out what the Light Eyes are. Is this a community creepypasta that isn't documented anywhere online? Is it a genuine group of sick players trying to scare people? An actual supernatural entity in a Sonic fan game? I don't know. All I know is that the people who originally told my friend about the Light Eyes aren't around anymore. Somehow, in some way, giant chunks of conversations are no longer present in the original correspondence that was had, and the accounts are either deleted or completely inactive. We don't know how that's possible or what happened. I just know that I don't have answers, and I'd love to see some right about now. In the end, I'm not afraid of looking stupid if this all turns out to be a massive hoax that I blindly fell for. Look at my face, into my eyes. I dare you to tell me I'm looking back at you with the utmost intelligence. What I am afraid of is that the above sentiment about believing others and the general call for more empathy will be discarded by those who really need it the most. Because the whole Light Eyes thing seems too much like bullshit to them. If there's anything this world of ours needs more, it is empathy. True, proper empathy. With that comes unity. With unity comes prosperity. So please, even if you don't agree with me for not trash-talking the subject of the entry, at least try to heed what comes after. Showing empathy 9 times out of 10 is free. Please, don't forget that. I really wanted to make a smaller video that would fill the gap between my last upload and the next. It's been over a year since my last proper upload, and while you've all shown nothing but support throughout that span of time, I can't help but feel like I really don't deserve all of it. Don't worry, I know better than to actually listen to that tinge of doubt in my heart. The big video I have planned is one that I'm still struggling with. I haven't touched it in many, many months, causing the research I had to do to fall right out of my head. I also have a few people I still need to talk to in order to get the most out of my research. I'll definitely end up covering the same sentiment that the Light Eyes entry does at the end of that video, as it is very relevant to it. More relevant than even this video could have ever been. It has taken me so long to make that big video that one of the topics in it, and all of the research I had to do, has very recently been compiled by someone else for a similar video, and it's a creator I'm familiar with, so if that's not a kick in the ass to get working, I don't know what is. Until then, remember that what you've been through and are currently going through is valid. The struggles you face are real. You have the power to persist, though. Even in your darkest hour, the sun will always rise again. Even if it takes a while, and everything seems bleak, everything will be okay in the end. You will be okay, no matter what this world may feel like it's coming to. You will be okay. Have a fungus.